so many overt nods to like iconic horror moments throughout Evil Dead Rise, and it's phenomenal because you've made them your own. I wanted to know if you put any more intimate nods just for yourself that people may not notice right off the bat.
There's a lot of Easter eggs in the movie. That's kind of that's the straight answer. So I think the deeper people dig, the more that they'll find. I kind of don't want to give away what they are, because the more that you actually dig in, you know, you're gonna have to go watch this movie 2 or 3 times to find everything that's there. But I did have a lot of fun. Like, Easter eggs are very much a secondary thing to the story that you're trying to tell. But it was really fun for me as a horror fan to communicate with horror fans that way and to share some really kind of fun tips of the cap, both to Evil Dead and to other elements of the horror world that I love.
That makes sense, and it totally worked. I mean, the elevator scene, I was like, oh, he did it. It was amazing.
I love The Shining, and I can't not put a Shining reference in everything that I do.
And you chose one of the best ones.
Yeah, I thought, like, we never saw inside the elevator in The Shining, so it was my opportunity to say, well, this is the sort of thing. If you're gonna have a lot of blood in an elevator, let's see what it looks like.
And when it comes to shooting with blood and shooting in action, do you take shooting action-based scenes or really bloody scenes differently, as opposed to the more dramatic that happens in the film?
I think so. I think in terms of how you're communicating with your actors, it's often quite different depending on if you're doing a more dramatic or emotionally driven scene, or then also when you're working on something that's action or has a lot of stunts to it. But you've also got to remember, you've got to keep the emotional center of the characters and where they are. So what I try and do shooting those scenes is protect the actors as much as I can from the machine that's at work so that they can purely focus on their performance.
And when it comes to that, what did you all do on set to kind of, because there were some intense moments, both physically for the actors as well as emotionally. Were there any kind of like action aftercare that went on in the when you all were filming?
What do you mean by action aftercare?
I was trying to figure out the best way. Like, I think Lily had mentioned that everybody laughed on set after something really happened, especially working with young actors too. And you said you protect them. Just wanted to kind of see what's that method like?
I think, like, at times, depending on what we're doing, I'd often bring the cast to the monitor when we had captured a really great kind of scary moment or a really cool stunt, or, you know, the crescendo of a set piece. And it was important for the cast to have a good time, because making an Evil Dead movie is a really grueling journey. And if everybody felt just trapped in their trailer on their own at the end of the day, it wouldn't really lend itself for, you know, a great vibe and a great environment the next day you came back in. Because every day you came onto this set, after about a week, every day you came in, you just had, you know, the hardest day. Fun, but really hard. Everybody was involved with stunts and, you know, blood work and, you know, having to get themselves into really heightened emotional states too, right? Because there's a point in that movie where every character's heart rate goes to a place that it never drops below ever again. So from that point of view, it was important for everybody to have the little bit of catharsis at the end of the day. And I was lucky to have a cast that I developed really nice personal relationships with and was able to, off camera, you know, quell their fears, have a joke, have a laugh, have a beer at the end of the day and kind of hang out. Kids obviously weren't drinking beer.
Yeah. I think one of the other really interesting things I thought was the way that the film used kind of Catholicism, and it's not throughout the whole film, but, you know, Catholicism, I don't know if a lot of people know, is different depending on what region you're in. I'm Mexican, so Mexican Catholicism, very different. Irish Catholicism, very different. I noticed that there's a mention to St. Patrick's in the rounding. Like, did you work in pieces of that very specific brand of Catholicism into the film over, you know, the generic priests and demons?
Yeah, like, it was something I thought about early on. I'd often wondered that if the Catholic Church knew of the Book of the Dead, they'd probably try and get their hands on it and figure out what it was. Could it be wielded in some way? And I based a lot of the mythology, if you want to call it that, in terms of, or the backstory, on, you know, my experience of Catholicism, you know, growing up in Ireland. So even the priests' names, a couple of them are like who my local priests were in my parish when I was growing up. And I just thought it was an interesting way to bring the backstory in and also to introduce into the lore the fact that someone in the real world is aware of the fact that there's more than one Book of the Dead out there. And yes, so St. Patrick's being Irish. There's a few little Irish things sewn throughout the movie. If you look really closely at the keys, there's a little leprechaun.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, now I have to watch it again. Exactly. And my last question is really, you know, Evil Dead movies are pretty short. Is pacing out something so intense, is that difficult to do, and what's kind of your process behind that?
The script was really tight, and I kind of ran through how that would appear on screen quite a lot. It was a very detailed screenplay. And storyboarded the film. So also when you then storyboard, I could take those storyboards and turn them into animatics and look at how the timing of a sequence might be. But through the editing process is really where you find the proper internal pace of a story. And early cuts are obviously a little bit longer. I think the movie's 96 minutes, including credits. So I think the runtime's about 91, 92. But we did have a 100-minute version of that movie also. But you just find your way to giving the best experience that you can. And I wanted it to be a film that people had to cling on while they watched. I never wanted to give people an opportunity to think or slow down or fall off. I just wanted them to almost be with the characters, just going through the mincer, going through the machine. So that was driving the choices I made with pace.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you for